the Agile brand.
Welcome to the B2B Agility Podcast, where we look at the factors that drive success in B2B marketing, with a focus on the people, processes, data, and platforms that make B2B brands stand out and thrive in a competitive marketplace. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom, advising Fortune 1000 brands on MarTech, marketing operations, and CX, best-selling author and speaker. Now let's get on to the show. Are your people, processes, and platforms delivering value to drive better customer experiences, or are they and your CX disconnected and siloed? Agility requires a willingness to adapt and evolve, as well as a deeper understanding of how customer trust is built or broken through simplicity, personalization, and empowered employees. Today, we're going to talk about how brands can transform their customer experience using AI-powered strategies. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome John Durocher, Chief Customer Officer at Calix. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, looking forward to talking about this with you. Definitely a timely topic here and looking forward to diving in. But before we do, why don't you give a little background on yourself and your role at Calix?
Absolutely. So as you heard, I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Calix, but how did I get here? In my career, I've kind of rode these big waves of business evolution. So I started at Accenture and worked on globalization and consolidation, outsourcing non-core functions, those global delivery models. From there, I went to Salesforce and got on the cloud evolution and building a success team kind of wave. And then I've ended up, my final stop here is at Calix. We're really trying to help our customers move from selling a commodity to delivering a differentiated experience, to deliver, an experience first kind of solution.
Nice. That's great. So yeah, let's dive in here, and definitely some great experience that gives some great insights into what we're about to talk about. And first thing I want to touch on is AI's impact on customer experience. Certainly, we talk about AI a lot on this show. Everybody's talking about AI a lot, of course, but I'd like to hear from you. How does Calix approach AI as an organization? And, what would you say is a guiding principle there?
Well, there's a couple of different dimensions. First of all, there's the approach of how do we adopt it? I'll talk about that first, right? Which is, really encouraging people to experiment. Think about what are the business problems that we want to solve in our company, experiment. But we've actually put governance around it, because you can experiment, but then if it doesn't get to scale, it's not that useful. So that's been a big part of our focus, is identify a problem, test it out, and then can this scale to help a department or the entire company? And we put some ground rules around that. From a product perspective, because we are a product company, right? We believe that AI has to be fundamental to the solution. It can't be bolted on the side. So we were in the midst of replatforming. So it was a perfect opportunity to re-architect how we were going to approach AI to begin with. And then lastly, as the Chief Customer Officer, I think it's got to be more about making sure that AI enhances the human experience, not diminishes that experience, right? Because, I think as a subscriber or as a customer, you think, is this going to be better for me or worse for me? And we really want to lean into saying, hey, this should be beneficial both to the employee experience, and if that's good, then the consumer experience could be better as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know I'm sure you've seen as well, a lot of product companies, let's say in some cases, slapping AI onto a bullet list of features. In other cases, more meaningfully, adopting it. But, you mentioned using AI to enhance the customer experience, and that's absolutely, instead of just, again, using AI for something that's not going to create real value. Can you share an example of, how is this being realized? How is it proactively solving problems for your clients and their subscribers?
Yeah, well, I'll be honest, it gets released in Q4. So in a few months, we're going to be releasing what it's going to do. But on our roadmap, and what we're focusing on is these agents that will do network anomaly detection. So you think about, people reacting to or getting a signal or waiting to find a signal. How about if that's all automated? so that the network is constantly looking ahead for the anomalies. Again, if you think about it, that's a service cloud kind of one where you're saying, hey, we're detecting an anomaly and we're getting an engineer to act before a customer even knows it's a problem,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that would be a great customer experience. They wouldn't even know it, which is really what you want as a customer. You want to, not have the problem at all, right?
Right.
And that's what we're trying to do is think about what we have. There's a lot of data available, but that data be parsed in a way that can be more useful. Same if you go onto the other side and saying, how do we do hyper personalization for the customer? Like you and I may be somewhat the same, and the offer comes in, but it's not a hit because it's not personalized to us. It's generalized. But because our BSPs have lots of data about those consumers, we can really take that data and really tune it. So you're getting hyper personalized offer in the app or in a channel that's just for you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Meeting their needs. I mean, that's our focus is really trying to do that and then chain these agents together because most workforces, a lot of our companies that we're dealing with are small in nature. And so they have a capacity problem. So how do we help them put the humans in the chain at the right spot, but automate all around?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and I know you touched a little bit on this too. This idea of empowering employees to deliver exceptional CX and just how important that is. Because again, you can automate things very completely or whatever, but when you take the employee completely out of the equation in the wrong way, the customers are going to feel it. Or, in some cases, customers want the employee in there and stuff. So to empower employees to deliver exceptional CX, what are steps that organizations can take to do this and really help their teams own that customer relationship?
Well, first of all, make sure they have the same data that the customers have about what's going on. That's not
Right.
always the case, right?
Yeah.
Second is, I think it's around your culture and the processes you put in place. I think it's, everybody has to have policies, but is the policy so restrictive that the customer, or the employee can't do the right thing for that customer? And we've seen it, right? Where the person on the other side of the desk is as embarrassed as you are about what they're having to say, right? Really empower them, give them some budget so that they can fix things when they need to be fixed. Because when you have that experience, I was telling somebody about a travel experience. I was going out to Iowa to do this bike ride, one of our customer sponsors across Iowa. And my bike, I could see that it was not on the plane. And we were leaving.
Yeah.
And the flight attendant saw that I was concerned, and they said, "Well, did your bag make it on?" I said, "It did not." And they immediately, like usually they would say, "Well, it's not my job."
Right.
This person went on to a social app that they had in the company and was texting, messaging people trying to get this bag on the plane. And then the pilot got involved, which I'm like, this is incredible. Now, in the end, the bike didn't make it. But how I felt about that, because they took a vested interest in just trying to help, right?
Yeah.
Versus just saying, hey, that's not my job. That's the ground, baggage handler. So
Yeah.
just a little thing like that changed my whole feeling about the bike not making it there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and in large organizations, I mean, it is so easy for there to be unaccountability, right? Because again, I've had good and also terrible experiences in the same way of just like people shrugging or whatever and saying, not my problem. And then I've had similar enough experiences where regardless of the outcome, when employees are empowered to be able to do and go the extra mile, then quite often that happens. But that stuck with you. Even the bag
I
didn't
tell that
even
story
get
a
on the
thousand
plane.
times, right? And it
Right.
didn't make it. Like the
Right.
outcome wasn't what it was, but how they handled it with empathy and a little like it wasn't that hard for them to do what they did, right? But I felt great about that. I felt like, okay, somebody's trying on my behalf versus just saying can't be done. Because it can be done. You have the technology. I know where that bag is. You know where the bag is because you told me it's not on the plane, right? In their app. So I think that like you said, accountability over blindly standing behind a policy is so powerful,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then rewarding that front line for doing that. I wish probably if I was a really good customer, I would have got that guy's name and wrote a thank you for trying, right?
Yeah.
And more people who are like you would be just an overall better experience.
Yeah, definitely. So how does a company find the right balance between, there's these automated systems that are great because they do a lot of the stuff that employees uh, AI is better at lots of things than humans. It's
Yes.
also not as good at many things as humans. How does an organization strike the right balance between, using technology where technology is good, things like AI, and also, maintaining the balance where people can try to do the right thing and, for their customers.
Yeah, I think this comes back to how did they design the customer experience? Oftentimes, when you think about the solution that they're a company solving, it's at a functional level, and they're like, "Oh, let me automate this. This would be amazing, right? It would be such a big cost savings, and it would be better." But they don't zoom out to say, what happens when that doesn't work? They don't get the answer. Or they need some kind of, and we've had this, like when it works, it's amazing. Like, companies like Amazon, you order and it all works. If you've ever had a problem with Amazon,
Don't get me
it's
started. Yeah.
it's impossible. There's no out button, right, to get to talk to a human being. So I think it's you have to intentionally design that there will be problems. There has to be a human that can come in and be part of that process. And even if it's only 10 to 15% of the cases, I think you leave customers thinking it was an amazing experience when it worked, and it was an amazing experience when something went wrong.
Yeah.
And that has to be intentional about how you think about customer experience, because I think most places, in the big companies I was at, it wasn't designed first. Functions have a goal that they're trying sales is trying to sell, marketing is trying to market, right? And you go through each function. Nobody's saying, okay, how does the customer experience that? What are the seams? What AI is going to do because of how it works? It is going to expose those seams
Yeah. Yeah.
fast, right? And if
Right.
you haven't really thought about that, first of all, you won't get the full value out of AI because the data won't be connected, the experience won't be connected, and you'll be automating things that aren't really good end to end. So I think being intentional about the design of that and what role humans will play. We've been talking a lot about this. The things that we want to automate is so we can increase human interaction,
Mm,
not decrease.
yeah.
Because we know that there are things that we do when we interact with our customers. They get better results, and then we get better results. So I think there's a big operational savings that can happen, but it shouldn't be at the cost of your entire experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. So, last topic I want to talk about is you've mentioned before trust and simplicity as cornerstones of great customer experience. And I want to talk about that. There's obviously there are examples of things, let's call them minor or relatively minor things that go wrong in the in the customer experience, and then there's data breaches or there's other major service disruptions. So there's a wide range of things, and some of these things diminish trust over time. Some of them can have a bigger impact. But how can companies rebuild trust where it's needed or strengthen trust with customers, even in light of some of these things happening?
I think first of all, it comes down to transparency and be willing to share when you're having a problem. Be proactive about that. I'll tell you the story. When I first got to Calix, our incident process wasn't as world class as I would have liked to have been. So I'm getting calls from the head of sales saying, "Hey, we have a problem," and I'm like, "Wait a minute. I don't want you to be telling me that. I want my team to be telling me, and I'm calling you, right? And letting all of our customers know that there's a problem." I said, we have a lot of work to do. And first of all, it's like getting the data signals, coming up with the process, standardizing communication. Early, you got to get everybody. Some people are like, well, we don't want to share that. We don't want to share that. And there's going to be some tension of what should be shared, what can't be, especially when you get to the security. That's a whole different level of discussion. But, I'd say incidents, and I'm on the side of erring on the side of transparency and information. Telling customers what they know, they will appreciate that. And look, I was in the early days of a cloud computing company, early days.
Yeah.
And we felt like we should tell them how we're doing and we should be intentional and we should be sharing. Cause look, they made a big bet. They trusted us to run their systems. They put their trust in us. So they risking their own career. So I, as the chief customer, owe them insight into what's happening, what are we doing about it, what are our swim lanes? Because I can't predict how long it's going to take to fix somebody. You cannot do that, but you can at least tell them, I have a plan. This is what we're doing. So they can at least say, okay, they have a well thought out action plan. This is the swim lanes, sharing as much about that. Customers, when you do that, they're way more forgiving, right? In terms of knowing what's gone on. They're not happy. Nobody's happy when you have an incident or an outage or security breach, but being in front of that, and I think there's some great examples. Sonos, when they changed the app, I don't know if you're a Sonos user.
I know the story, but yeah.
I mean, right? And when they started to really communicate, you felt better about the situation versus what was happening before as a customer. And I think that's an important step.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and committing to sharing, like we have a ton of user groups, but the long-term improvements. So what do you, not just what did you do to solve that, but what are you doing to, avoid other problems? Giving people confidence that, you're looking at this carefully. And again, I think that's an important part of the step as well, and really building trust and letting people, by the way, if you do it enough, they're like, quit telling me that stuff. I don't care. You haven't had a problem, right? And that's exactly, I want them to be bored with that conversation when we have it, because I know then we've done a good job of staying in front of it and them trusting and saying, this is not my problem to need to worry about. You guys have it under control.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that I think that transparency is, and to your point, I think most customers, when they're just communicated with, when they know that someone's actually on the other end of the the line or whatever, they're going to be a lot happier. And yet, a lot of organizations have some challenges even with that, be it whether it's silos or other things kind of getting in the way of not only communication and transparency, but also the journey that the customer goes through as well. I always say, like, a website or an experience shouldn't be organized like the org chart, right? It should be around the customer, right? So what can companies do to simplify that, regardless of the org chart and the, all the stuff? Because some of that's, for better or worse, necessary, or at least it's not going to change anytime soon. How can a company simplify the journey just so it's easier for customers to interact with them?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you what we are doing. I had a guy on my team experimenting with just that, right? With our customers' websites, and said, hey, what happens if we created an agent to go out to your website and we prompted it to say, I'm a new customer. Are the offers clear? What are the sticking points? Where do I get hung up? What's the flow like? Think about, like,
Yeah, yeah.
if you can direct AI to do that, now we have that in our hands with a report, and we can say, how do we make that better? Right. And that's like, I think that's an important part, is looking at those touch points, secret shopping, all those things to really experience it like your customers do, and find out. Because I think, first of all, the most important thing is, do you understand what that experience is like?
Right, right.
You
Yeah,
really understand. I mean, I was at a company, our CEO used to go do it.
yeah,
He would go out to the website, try and buy something, and then he'd call the marketing team in and said, because he would go to our site and then other sites. And he
yeah.
said, why is it so much easier over here? Why are we not easier? And so somebody's, filling that role and making sure that the links aren't broken, simple things like that, which is, frustrating to consumers and tedious to go through and do, but important in creating that experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so important that not just like the QA team does stuff like that, but it's like other, I mean, I know somebody shared with me the other day, like some very high level person at Uber, like product person, literally does deliveries and like does Uber rides, like at some, I don't know how frequent, but they do it, and they do it regularly. Yeah.
They're so important. Yes, one of our customers, the CEO, went on a ride along, and he was with a technician, and he was there, and they were walking around, and the CEO picks up the garbage cans because they're out the street.
Yeah. Yeah.
The guy said, like, what are you doing? If I'm a good neighbor or if I'm a good partner, why wouldn't I bring these in for them? Like, just little
Right.
things just to reinforce the behaviors that you want people to take. You model it, you see it, you can see what's really happening versus what you think is happening. I think, those are really important.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So, looking ahead, what are what are some of the most exciting potential applications of AI and CX that you're seeing?
I think those that I mentioned earlier, the hyper personalized ones, I think that is really exciting to market to me as me. Nobody else, just what my combination of activities and products that I own. Um, I think the second one is this predictive service when you're fixing things before they're even broken. I mean, that's great. Acknowledging and being able to do that on a seasonal basis, looking at the trends in seasonal, but also what's happening in the community and what's happening around that, and then really dial that in. I think those are things that humans could never do without lots of humans looking at lots of dials, which is not scalable. So I
Right.
think
Right.
that's the other one. And then I think the last one is more of an employee experience, but think about AI powered coaching
Mm, yeah.
and having a coach next to you all the time. Like, first of all, it's not embarrassing because it's AI. Like, I mean, it's like having a full-time coach that just cares about your success. I think those are the areas that I'm really excited about because it can, up level skills, change the experience, make people more productive, maybe make the job more fulfilling.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and it's elevating that employee, and instead of replacing them, it's helping them do their job better and grow and learn. And yeah, that's awesome. Well, John, thanks so much for joining today. One last question before we wrap up here. I like to ask everybody, what do you do to stay agile in your role, and how do you find a way to do it consistently?
Yeah. So there's three things that I always do. First of all, I mentioned it. Listen closer to my customers. Never stop listening to customers. Right. The second is looking at the data. What is the data telling me that maybe the customers aren't telling me? And then the third is around that. I think what you were really going with, what's on the horizon for innovation? What's the emerging technology, the market disruptions? How do you apply, these ideas that are not maybe in your industry to what you're doing? And so podcasts like yours is a great one. Articles. I dedicate a portion of my time every day to listen to a podcast and read articles so I stay relevant. Otherwise, I think, the world is changing so quickly. I just get left behind.
Yeah, love it. Well, again, I'd like to thank John Durocher, Chief Customer Officer at Calix, for joining the show. You can learn more about John and Calix by following. You can learn more about John and Calix by following the links in the show notes.
Greg, thanks so much for having me on as a guest. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it was. Thanks. Thanks again for listening to the B2B Agility Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.b2bagility.com. That's b2bagility.com. While you're there, check out my series of best-selling Agile brand guides covering a wide variety of marketing technology topics, or you can search for Greg Kihlstrom on Amazon. Until next time, stay focused and stay agile.
The Agile brand.